Hello and welcome, dear viewers, to a brand new episode of your show, The Untold. My name is Daij Al-Hotiri, and I'm here, of course, always with my colleague Fatma Al-Awadi. How are we doing today?
We're doing amazing. Thank you very much, Daij. Today we have a special guest. His name is Mr. Richard Bushman, and he will talk to us about Ahmadi Music Group and, of course, his adventures in the music
world. Yes. All right. Stay tuned, dear viewers. Don't go away. We will be back. All right, welcome back, dear viewers, and of course, me and Fatma, we are so happy to have you here with us, Mr. Richard Bushman. So obviously, we read the script, and definitely, you have a interesting background regarding music and the education, and of course, being trained in one of the prestigious institutions like the New England Conservatory and also Boston University. So quite a lot to talk about, and of course to uncover the untold story of you. So go ahead and tell us something that we may not know here in the script.
Well, thank you very much for having me. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here, and well done you for all the great work that you do. So it is certainly true that my life and my working life is either diverse or chaotic, depending on your point of view. In general, I like chaos. I like confusion. I think those are they bring opportunity. And so most of my working life, I was an investment banker. When I finished college at Harvard University in Boston, where I grew up, I went to work on Wall Street for a bank, and I worked for a bank for 30 years, including 10 years living in Saudi Arabia. And then I came to Kuwait, originally many times on just visiting business trips. And then I came 2006 to work as a banker to run the investment office for one of the big families in Kuwait. And then when I came here, just as I arrived, there was this thing, Ahmadi Music Group, which we think is the oldest and the biggest cultural organization in Kuwait. We have concert records from 1955, when KOC down in Ahmadi brought the first expatriates to live in Kuwait. It was like if you bought a strange pet, you look up on the internet, what is it like to eat?
And so do your research.
They thought, what should we do for these foreigners living in Kuwait? And so they built them a bowling alley, and they built them a theater, and they built them a cinema, and they started this Ahmadi Music Group. And so it was kind of a community club when I first came, and the person who was running it said to me and my wife, could you guys take it over? We're about to leave Kuwait. And we did. And we immediately thought, oh, they could be doing much, much more than they're doing for the talent, for the energy that they have. And so we added to the community choir, the symphony orchestra, fully staged opera. We've done 10 or 12 fully staged operas in Kuwait. I always say, and it's true, it's not a joke, I've done more opera in Kuwait than everyone else in the world combined, because I've done 10 or 12, and everyone else together has done about 3. Very happily, now we have a jazz ensemble that's started by my son, who's a jazz musician in London. Kuwait Jazz Collective still going, and now one of our busiest things is school. We had last week at American University of Kuwait, we had 65 children on stage playing violin. We raised a good amount of money for Beit Abdullah, the hospital. And my view is that an arts organization should be 50% performance and 50% teaching. This is the rationale that everyone has to have. And the kind of philosophy of it is we want to put ourselves out of business. I want to keep the orchestra going enough that we can all be replaced by Kuwaitis, and 20 years from now, our orchestra should be 80% Kuwaiti. We are already, I think we teach more Kuwaiti children than anyone else. we're the only orchestra that does the extra work to include Kuwaiti musicians in our orchestra. First time ever on the stage of Jabal Ahmed Center, we had Kuwaiti nationals standing up in front as soloists to play a solo concerto with orchestra, which no one else has ever even tried to do. But we won't be satisfied until really the orchestra is dominated.
Like
and
100%.
run. And yeah, maybe not. I hope they'd still let a few foreigners like me sit in the back.
I mean, it's without you, I mean,
But
Yeah,
the rationale should be,
There
the
would
point, our thing is we should be bringing international music to Kuwaitis, and we should bring Kuwaiti music to international. And so we try to do a little bit of work on both sides of that.
And when we were talking about your time in the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, can you tell us about your memory of being the principal viola?
Yeah, so it's a funny thing because there's kind of you know what a viola is?
Yes.
It's like a violin, but a little bit bigger.
I love the sound of viola.
I love the sound of viola as well. But the joke among musicians is that people who are not very good violin players change to viola.
Oh.
And in my case, it's sort of true. I was a very ordinary violin player, and then I could be kind of an okay viola player. And so when I was about, I guess, 13, 14 years old, I went and auditioned. I was living in the suburbs of Boston where there are a lot of very education-minded families.
Yes.
In my school, there's 6 or 7 other kids who were serious musicians. I was just serious enough to kind of hang up with them in the background. But then you go and audition, and they accepted me. And I've had really a thing this week, which is that the first piece we played is Symphony Number 8 by a composer called Dvorak. And about a month ago, a guy moved to Kuwait to become the head of music in one of the schools in Kuwait. And his specialty is taking giant pieces of music and rearranging them for smaller groups. And he said, could we do something? And I said, yeah, I love that. And so he brought to my house that same symphony, Symphony Number 8 by Dvorak. Okay. And now our little 15, 18, 20-person orchestra is learning to play it. Inshallah, we hope that in the fall we'll perform it at Yarmouk. So I'm having this complete musical circle right now from age 14 till age whatever. And doing the same piece, and it sounds so great to me, this piece. It's as exciting as ever to hear now.
Well, best
This
of luck.
is very
This is
exciting.
exciting,
Yeah,
definitely.
it really is exciting.
And now, having you working with conductor Ben Zander must have been enriching experience. So can you elaborate and tell us what valuable lessons did you learn from him?
Well, I can say, I played in a bunch of orchestras as a, student and in a university and this and that. And 3 or 4 conductors really just stood out in my mind. And I try to be like them. Ben Zander is an English guy, went to live in the United States. The story about him was he was an unbelievable cellist. He played the cello so beautifully. But he had a skin condition in his fingers that the skin couldn't get hard. He couldn't form calluses. And so his fingers would be sore and bleed, and he couldn't have the life he thought as a professional cellist. So he became a conductor. And he started a youth orchestra in Boston. And he treated us like grown-ups musically, and it was a fantastic, fantastic experience. One of the things he did is what we call an explication concert, where you take half the program and explain about a piece of music. And 2 years ago, I did this at Jabal Ahmed Center. We did Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, ba-da-na-na,
Yes.
da-na-na-na. And I said to the audience, many of whom it's their first time they've ever heard this live, most of them, I think, when we perform Jabal Ahmed Center, our audience is 80% Kuwaiti, which I'm so grateful for. But I think many of them did not have a complete, international music training. They want to have global culture in their lives for themselves and their children. Good for them. I totally salute that. And so I said, we're going to explain how this works. And, this is what Beethoven's doing here. And listen for this guy. And during the performance, I did a thing I don't think anybody does. I would point to the guy and say, listen to him now. And so, and that's the thing I learned from Ben Zander, that, most of the time when we experience a work of art, a painting, piece of music, ballet, poetry, we sort of go through it and yeah, fair enough. But taking time to kind of dig into it is the sign of quality. If you can study it more and like it more and more and more, the more you study it, that's a sign of its permanent quality.
That's beautiful. And if we want to talk about your participation in, let's say, Gilbert and Sullivan Society Orchestra and other musical activities at Harvard, how did they influence your musical development?
Well, do you know about Gilbert and Sullivan? They were a comedy writer and a very serious composer. And they lived in Victorian times in about 1880, 1890. And they wrote 13 or 14 comic operas together. And for the guy who wrote the words, this was his number one thing. Like many comedians, he had a not very healthy psyche. You know, a lot of people are comedians. It's a sign of, you know, unbalanced psyche.
Yes.
Anyway, he did well. He did a lot. The composer hated this. He wanted to write serious, serious music, but the only thing the audience wanted from him was this comic stuff. So they basically wrote incredibly insightful social critique in an incredibly funny way. And when we first said, well, we're going to do opera, we started with those in Kuwait. We did The Pirates of Penzance, which is about a boy who gets accidentally sent to work for a band of pirates and wants to leave, you know, et cetera. Right. We did a Japanese one, we did an Italian one. And the pressure of a show like that is time pressure. Okay. Because you know at the start, you have, you know, the performance date is here. My budget is 4 rehearsals only with the orchestra. So as the conductor, you have to be so mega prepared. So I count every measure of every part, the oboe, the violins, to make sure there's no mistake in the parts. If you get there and there's a mistake, something you didn't know about, is going to take you 10, 12, 15 minutes to fix, and you don't have that time. So I love that, the time pressure, the efficiency, plus I completely love Gilbert and Sullivan's things. There's one more that I want to do. There's one called HMS Pinafore, about the admiral of the British Navy who's never been to sea. He got there completely by political things. And this is a satire of how the British Navy worked in those days. That's the other big one that Gilbert and Sullivan wrote. Plus, it's just so fun. Those things are difficult to do because everyone in the production has to dance. You'll have to, the whole chorus, 60, 70 people, has to learn 7 or 8 dances, memorize them. You know, so it's a lot of material to put on.
And it's a lot of pressure. That's the chaos he was talking about when he liked the chaos at the beginning. Yes, yeah.
And your involvement in various musical groups, like for instance, we have the Harvard Glee Club and also the Dunster House musicals, shows a strong commitment, ensemble performance. So how did that impact you as a conductor?
You know, the thing, you always learn from watching how other people do it. You say this person was 100% effective as a director, this person 90%, this person 50%. And so when I started contemplating putting on really complex things, because there really is nothing more complex than a live opera or a live musical. There are other people in Kuwait that put on musicals. None of them do it with live music. We do, every sound you hear has to be made by a living musician right there on the stage, a singer or a violinist or this. Most of the things we do, no microphone. It's got to be all natural sound. So everything we do has to be produced by a live musician. And so, you know, to get the scenery, to get the costumes, to get the makeup, to get the choreography, the publicity, the ticket sales. And, you know, Archimedes Music Group is just it's kind of a casual club. It really falls a lot on the director to be responsible for all those areas. So that's the main thing I learned, is from seeing show after show after show. What are the things that I liked doing? What are the things that made me feel nervous about the management?
Yes.
And you feel a lot of pressure and stress. You know, I remember driving, for example, to the British Embassy. We used to put on big orchestra concerts, 1,000 people there. And I'm thinking, all over Kuwait right now, there are 1,000 people getting in cars and driving there because we told them to. What if I just said, I'm not going to go, you know, the whole thing, you know. So you feel like you're kind of right in the middle of this thing to make it all happen, which is an exciting and frightening feeling at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, Mr. Bushman, let's take a quick break, dear viewers, and then get back to get to know more about the untold story of Mr. Richard.
No, actually, we will be back.
Bach.
I get it.
Welcome back, everyone. We are still here with Mr. Richard Bushman. Now, Mr. Bushman, if we could talk about one thing, we talked about it before we started rolling the cameras. It's about your transition from becoming a musician. You shifted to banks and Wall Street. You started working there. What inspired you to do this shift?
You know, now that I'm old and working with young people, my wife is a very, very high-level professional musician, much higher than me. And we talk about this thing of the idea of becoming a professional musician. For me, unless you are one of these mega top end players, doing music for money takes away most of the things that you loved about it in the first place.
Yes, it has to be passion.
And so not only passion, but just ridiculous high level of skill and commitment. People say to me all the time, I would give anything to play the piano the way your wife plays the piano. I said, how about 6 hours a day for 20 years? Would you give that? So, well, you know, because that's what it takes. So I never thought of myself as good enough to be a professional musician. Certainly not as a player. There are hundreds of people, thousands of people who are better players than I am. Where I think my place is that having played in orchestras, sung in choirs, been in musicals, in every kind of musical genre, jazz groups, etc. I have, I think, a better, and having been a business finance person, I think I have a better business understanding than a lot of musicians have, and a better musical understanding than a lot of business people have. And so I can kind of sit in the middle and say, it's my job to have a musical vision and a financial vision. How does this get paid for? Because, right from the start, we said we pay professional musicians. I'm not asking anybody to do this for charity. They've worked for decades to become this good. So I think that's kind of the position that I have in Kuwait. I can sit between the organizing, the business, the finance, the strategy, and the straight music.
Right, but also, was it an escape from work too, music?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I moved to New York to work on Wall Street, the first thing I looked for was what's a choir that I can join,
Okay.
And do some music on the side. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, after the successful career in finance, what inspired you to actually retire in 2013 and return to being a full-time musician?
I certainly didn't really plan it. I was working for, as I said, a family office here, and, this or that project came along. But at the same time, the music things in Kuwait were growing. Ahmadi Music Group was doing bigger and bigger and more complex things. The teaching was growing. And so at one point they came and said, do you want to do another project? And I just said, no, I don't really. And so I took an 85% pay cut, solved my tax problem by becoming a violin teacher, which is now my day job. And I didn't really plan it. It just kind of grew like a possibility. I didn't think it would ever happen, but now I enjoy it so much.
Wow. Yes. And speaking of, inspiration and also achievement, as the conductor of Ahmadi Music Group and also the artistic director, tell us about the most memorable achievements that you're proud of for Ahmadi Music Group.
Oh, gosh. The choir has done so well for us all the time. One thing was we were the first orchestra to play at Jabal Ahmed Center. We did a Beethoven symphony, Beethoven's Fourth Symphony, which is not one of his sort of mega famous ones, but I have always loved it my whole life, and it's a thrill to get to play it. I think it's the first time that a classical symphony was played start to finish ever in the history of Kuwait. I think certainly orchestras had visited, but they always told them the audience in Kuwait can't do a full piece. Don't do just some little things. And I don't think that's true. When we started putting on opera, we said, we're going to do it the same way you'd hear it in London, the same way you'd hear it in Paris, the same way you'd hear it is how we're going to do it. And that's always been our goal. So being the first one at Jabal Ahmed Center was great. First time we did a fully staged opera, Pirates of Penzance, in a little tiny theater in Mushraf. You've probably never been there, but the National Council, Majlis al-Watani, has a beautiful little cultural center in Mushraf that no one ever goes to. One of my dreams is to be able to take it over and renovate it. You could run the most fantastic arts program ever from there.
That would be nice.
It would be
Yeah, I
so
would love to go
fantastic.
there, yeah.
A school, and it's a nice little, not very big theater, but great.
You live in Mishrif.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
you know where the Mishrif Co-op is? It's right, it's
Yes,
hidden inside.
it's
Yes,
right like next to
hidden
me.
back inside there. So that was great. For our 60th anniversary, we put on Verdi Requiem, which was a gigantic piece to put on, which we managed to raise the money for and sell the tickets for. This year we did. There was a guy in Kuwait, a violinist, who was teaching at a school, and then the school closed. He left. Immediately was taken as the leader of one of the most prestigious orchestras in Europe, the Mozarteum in Salzburg. He agreed to come back and play a Mozart concerto with us. So, always the project I'm working on at the moment is the one I'm most in love with.
Can you imagine the stories behind every individual and the orchestra?
Yeah, I know, right? And being a conductor, he must be so proud. You must be proud of your Ahmadi group.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm so proud.
Yeah.
And, I can tell you, when I started to say to the choir, we're going to try to really upgrade, it was not their instinct that this is what they wanted. They didn't want to go on stage and wear costumes and dance. They didn't want to make the effort to learn big, serious classical pieces. But in the end they said, no, this is great. We want more and more and more of this.
That's brilliant. All right, so you actually got the chance to teach students in Riyadh, in London, and also in Kuwait. There has to be some differences, right? But amongst the different regions. So what is it?
I would say the children are a lot the same. The parents are sometimes different. So in Kuwait, I hear more here than anywhere else, parents saying, I can't help my child practice. It's up to you. You got to. So they'll send him for lessons 2, 3, 4 times a week. And oftentimes I think to myself, I'm not teaching this child, I'm teaching this child's children. That is, he's going to grow up, or she, as a parent who understands what it takes to learn to play music, and will then encourage their children to do it. So,
right.
In the same way, when I first came to the Middle East in 1985, people said to me, almost no one driving on the road drove by watching his parents drive, because until 1970 or whatever, there just weren't that many cars.
Yes.
And so everyone you see is a first-time driver. And now in Kuwait, almost everyone is a first-generation musician. Almost everyone that we teach is a first-generation musician. Almost none of them, a few of them, but not very many, have parents who know about this or understand about it. So it's a long-term thing. We're planting seeds, trying to grow a forest. But alhamdulillah, the kids come and just today I was going to school, visiting all the classes, playing violin, saying, you got to sign up for lessons next year. I went to a Kuwaiti school, Bayan bilingual school, and 50 kids signed up for violin lessons, immediately. They wouldn't let me take that many, but now inshallah we hope we grow a really vibrant program of all Kuwaitis.
That's actually nice. The increasing of musicians here in Kuwait. It's going to be interesting in the future, I would say.
So we're very hopeful.
And it's a thing, international schools, it's easy for me to go to. The English school where I teach also, they have 4 violin teachers. I could fill my week with students from there, but not that many Kuwaitis. And what I really want is lots and lots of Kuwaitis.
We love this dedication. I feel proud that he's trying to teach,
Yes,
Kuwaitis have to, yes. Well, Mr. Bushman, you also have the Suzuki method that you depend on in your teaching. Why do you think this is very important and beneficial or effective, especially in a diverse cultural context of Kuwait?
So Mr. Suzuki was a Japanese guy. He lived until he died about 1980, something like that, not that long ago. He was the first Japanese person to make his living playing a European instrument. He was a violinist himself. And he said the way we teach music is wrong. So still today, when I see other teachers, when the kid comes in, the first thing they do is they show him the book and say, this note means this or that. And Suzuki said, you would never make a child read before you let him speak or sing. Just start playing music. So in my lessons, within about 3 minutes, they're beginning to play Twinkle Little Star on the violin and a song that they recognize. So that was one of Mr. Suzuki's great ideas, is just start with the music. You can fill in all the technical stuff later on. And then the second great thing that he said is you got to, as quickly as possible, get kids playing in groups. So you have a lesson by yourself once a week, and you play with a group once a week.
Yes.
And that's so made, the kids love to see, I'm ahead of you, I'm behind you, they're motivated, they ask each other, which piece are you on now? And it's very, very sequential, so they just love, you know, trying to catch up, trying to stay ahead. And now, you know, these groups become little orchestras, you know, these are 10, 12-year-old kids who can read their own part, play ensemble music together, which is really, in terms of cognitive processing, an incredibly difficult thing to do, but they learn to do it.
I love how Mr. Bushman, he said, I make them make the sound in the first few minutes, because I got to tell you, 2 years ago, I started playing violin. And once
you?
yes.
And how did it go?
It did not go well once I was introduced to the vibrato.
Oh, yeah, tough.
And then exactly,
It's difficult.
and I couldn't perform the calluses too. There's nothing wrong. I don't have a condition. It's just that maybe because I haven't been practicing
You just need
enough.
to
You
practice
have to
outside.
practice.
That's the reason,
And
yes.
between work and doing my masters and all of that, I could not see myself practicing more than 1 hour, 3 times a week.
You just couldn't balance.
No,
But,
that's
could
a lot.
not- I could not
How long
balance
have you
it.
been playing before they tried to do vibrato with you? How long have you been playing? 2 years. Is that what you said? 2 years?
3 months.
3 months? And they
Yes.
started, ooh,
Yeah, I think
That's
I was
so-
introduced to the vibrato
Yeah.
very early,
yeah.
and I think that's what my other instructor told me.
I would have said, don't rush into it. There's plenty of
Really?
time.
Like,
Yeah.
Can you give us some tips, actually?
Well, about learning vibrato.
Vibrato.
There are thousands of methods, and they're all the same in the end. But my thought is you have to be pulled into it by wanting to make a beautiful sound. Because learning it is frustrating and slow. It's an unnatural motion. We say, my wife and I, playing the piano is physically very natural, mentally unnatural, this kind of thing.
Yes.
Playing the violin is mentally very natural, physically unnatural. It's very awkward, thing, the way we've learned to do it over the centuries. And so, to rush into vibrato, I would say is a teaching mistake.
And-
There are a lot of fun things you can do before you slow yourself
teaching,
down
yeah.
with that. And in fact, I criticize myself because learning vibrato is quite boring. There's always more fun stuff to do. So I have
Baroque
6 or 7
style or
students
something.
who should by now have been learning vibrato, and I'll say, oh, yeah, we'll start next year.
That's interesting. And you know what I really like about the violin and also
What?
the viola, because you will not hear the main singer with the violin. You will hear the main singer or the lead vocalist with the piano, as the piano can go in the background. But with the when you do a solo in the violin, that's the singer singing. You cannot merge the lead vocalist with, it doesn't work like that.
We've done several pieces that are written for 2 singers and who make a duet and sing together, and you replace one of them with a violin, and that is a very cool
Wow.
sound. It's a very cool sound. We should do some more of that.
that's a lot of information.
I'm so sorry I got into it. I couldn't. I got out of the script. I'm
But it's
not
okay.
even-
Actually, we
sorry,
almost
Aziz.
run out of time. So we basically just want you to tell the audience, and of course, tell us an advice before we wrap the episode.
Here's what my thought is. I lie awake at night trying to think how to have a 3-part program. One is to keep the orchestra alive. And it doesn't have to do very much. 3-4 things a year is what I would like to do with the grown-up orchestra. That's thing one. Thing two, to continue to build our teaching program so that 20 years from now, our orchestra will be mostly Kuwaiti. And thing 3 that I would really like to do, which is such an opportunity because no one else is doing it, is keep opera going and start a new thing and make Kuwait the world leader in new Arabic language opera.
Hopefully.
Wow.
Best
International
Be
festival. I've spoken to festivals
fascinating.
that if I brought you an opera written by an Arab woman, they said, please call me first when you have that. You could go, and compared to other cultural things, the cost would be so small. So, dear viewers, who wants Kuwait to become the world leader, the #1 soft power, best access to world leaders there is through opera.
Wow,
It's
I'm
going to be
blown away.
interesting
Yes.
and fascinating. But yes, hopefully we get to have that in the future. Well,
Yes,
with that
thank you.
said, dear viewers, we have reached the end. So we will take a quick break and then get back to you to wrap the episode.
Yes,
Thank you
thank
so much
you.
for being part of this interview.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you very much. It was very informative, and I really enjoyed it.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Unfortunately, dear viewers, we ran out of time, and that was the end of this beautiful, amazing. I would say he was very hyped. He was
About,
yes,
yes, his
everything,
musical journey.
the story behind the career, the music, the orchestra, everything.
Yes.
It was very nice and fascinating, and I really enjoyed the interview.
Me too. I really enjoyed it, and
I
at
can
one
tell.
point, right? At
Yes.
one point, I was not even looking at the questions. I was just asking questions on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a musician, but I love music, and I care about the information that
Mm-hmm.
musicians have, and the way they teach us, the way they give us, the tips and tricks,
Mm-hmm.
and their journey, of course, in their music career.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very happy and very pleased and honored to have someone as prominent as Mr. Richard Bushman, and we will see you on another episode of The Untold.